All right, should we start? Looks like we already have quite a crowd.
Yep.
53.
Okay. Hello and welcome to the Westhill and Stanford High joint PTSO meeting tonight. We have the Manners Group, who is a college consulting group from Fairfield County that will be talking to us and telling us what are the best ways for our kids to get into college during these crazy times. Beth is a certified college admissions has a certificate, losing it, college admissions counseling from UCLA. She's a graduate of Tufts University, and she has been working in Fairfield County for a number of years, helping students apply to college and finding their specific choice that's going to be right for them. Tim is also a graduate of Tufts University and works as the essay specialist for the Manners Group. He works with the kids in writing the essays, helping them form the ideas, and really making it specialized to them and helping them make their essays stand out. So in a couple minutes, we'll start having them present. Principal Rinaldi and Principal Manko will be saying a couple words first. So Mike, do you want to kick off?
Sure. Thanks, Judy. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Very excited that the Manners Group is here to present this evening on some obviously very important information on how to get into college. And I'm excited as well.
College advisors.
I'm sorry. Oh, someone else is talking. I'm sorry. So I also think it's wonderful that our school communities come together for events like this, and maybe this is the silver lining in all of this COVID stuff. And these are things that we can do going forward, even after the pandemic is over. So I want to throw it over to Mr. Manko, my partner over at Stanford High.
Michael, thank you very much for this opportunity, Judy, and also Beth and Tim. I know that when I was younger, we all were younger. We all went on different journeys. We had very different paths to get to colleges and universities, and then get our degrees after that. Some of us had great, structure and experience with our families behind us. Some of us didn't. My family, my mom didn't come from this country. My father was really, he worked hard and he got one of his degrees when I was in high school. But it was something that really relied on other people. So to be able to have an opportunity like this from your organization and to have a support group around us that we can reference and use beside our school counselors and besides our administrators, our friends, I think this is a wonderful experience. So again, I want to express my gratitude from me personally and also on behalf of Stanford High School. And as Mike mentioned, hopefully this is something that moving forward, we can do periodically to be able to benefit both of our school communities. So thank you very much. I look forward to tonight's presentation.
This is the best view.
Papa, baap chup honge, please.
This view with colors, with light.
Papa!
Hey, could I please ask everyone to put their mute button to click on it so we're not getting all of the background noise?
All right. Sounds good. Well, I'm Beth, and this is Tim.
Hi there.
Manners. And thank you, Judy, for organizing this, and thank you to Westhill and Stanford High for hosting us tonight. So
just to give you kind of the lay of the land, Beth is going to give you an overview, a rather comprehensive overview of everything that you need to know, or at least the 10 most important things that you need to know about getting into college, about the college admissions process. I specialize in the essay, so I'll do a little 5-10 minutes or so on just the essay. If you have questions, we're happy to take them. We'll take them at the end of the presentation, though, so just use the chat to send questions, and then we'll handle them at the end. So that, Beth?
yeah. So as you probably know, it is a process getting into college. And so we're going to jump right in. So this time of year, my seniors, their applications are already in. They're waiting to hear from colleges. Some of them have already heard from a lot of colleges. They've done very well. They're very successful. Why? Because they had the right college list. And that's completely individual. Each student has different colleges. There's not really one college for a student. There's a whole list of colleges for every student. And putting together right from the get-go that list that's right for your student is very, very important. It's very, very individual. There are 3,000 four-year colleges in the United States. Tim and I tour them as part of our work. We work with all kinds of students, all levels, struggling students, very high-achieving students. There are great colleges for every student, but the important thing is getting that right list for your student. So what makes a fit? Number one, kids are primarily going to college for the academics. So academic match is the first thing we talk about. You want your student to be challenged, but you don't want them to be overfaced. Yes, we want them to work hard and spend lots of time in the library, but not all their time. So you want to look at colleges and the level of students that they're accepting and make sure it matches your student. Learning style. I always ask my students, how do you learn? Are you a participant learner? Do you learn from class discussion and you learn a little from the homeworks every night? How do you like to be assessed? Do you like to have class discussion as part of your grade and then a quiz every week and then homeworks and projects and then tests? Those students, called the participant learners, really do well in smaller classes that smaller and medium schools will have. Other students who prefer, they're very comfortable in a large lecture, could take good at note-taking, and in big classes with 300 students. Also, a student has to be a very good test taker to be comfortable in a large lecture. So these are some of the things in terms of learning style. Majors and minors. So many students, probably most students, don't really know, especially in the United States, what they want to major in when they apply. Going in undecided, perfectly fine. But when I speak to my students, I always tell them, look at each college and see what majors and minors they offer. You'll see a wide range. Not every school offers the same subjects. So you want to make sure your student sees 2 or 3 areas that he or she wants to explore in the list of majors. Common majors, English, psych, econ, you can pretty much find everywhere. But if your student wants business, engineering, communications, not every school offers that, marine science, other more obscure. So it's important right from the beginning to look at that. Curriculum and structure. Some schools will have a very rigid freshman and sophomore year. They have a core curriculum. They call that the general education requirements. And every student in the school must take 2 semesters of math, 2 semesters of science, social sciences, etc. And they'll do that usually freshman and sophomore year and then declare a major and do most of their major work in junior and senior year. But some colleges have what they call the open curriculum, where there's really not a lot of requirements freshman year, maybe just a freshman writing course, and they have lots of flexibility. So some students prefer that. Social match and community, especially if the student is going away to a residential college. Kids want to be comfortable. Usually when they walk on campus, if you go for visits, teenagers can pick up that vibe. I fit in here, I don't fit in here. They're not happy socially, they're not going to do it well. They're not happy socially, they're not going to do it well academically. Location and climate, that goes without location and climate, that goes without saying. Echo?
We're getting some feedback.
We're getting some feedback. Oh, I think it's better.
Keep going.
Okay, so location and climate, that's also individual. Some kids want to be in a city, some want the mountains, some want palm trees. Cost. Cost can be very different at all different colleges, and it's something you want to look into right from the beginning. You don't want your student to get accepted at lots of schools and then have to worry about how am I going to pay for it. You want to think about that up front. Community college, UConn can be the most affordable. Then there's the state schools and private schools can be a lot more money. But not every student pays the full sticker price. There's financial aid. I could probably do a whole talk just on financial aid, but just for tonight, the basics are, there are two types of financial aid. There's need-based financial aid and merit-based financial aid. Need-based financial aid, students fill out the free application for federal student aid. You've probably heard of it, the FAFSA. And it's based primarily on the family's income. And students can get significant need-based financial aid. Merit-based aid has nothing to do, in most cases, with the family's income. It has to do with the student's grades and scores. And if you put your student at the top of the applicant pool in terms of grades and scores, they will often get merit-based aid. We're talking about scholarships, and they can also be significant. And some schools will layer need-based aid and then layer on top of it merit-based aid. This is very helpful in paying for it. So I always ask my students, you may not know what you want to study in college, you might not know what you want to be when you grow up, but think about, what do you want to accomplish in college? What do you want those 4 years to be like? It can be, again, a wide variety of possibilities. Do you want to meet lots of international and diverse students from all over the world? Do you want to do undergraduate research, study abroad? There's so many opportunities. Greek life, the football games, really give some thought to those 4 years. And what do you want to accomplish? Do you want to have lots of internships? Do you want to get a job? Is that a goal, to have a job when you get out of college or go on to graduate school? So those are things, when you're putting together that just right list, that should come to mind. So that's how we put together the list, but what are the colleges looking for? We have to get in, we have to put colleges on, or students on that they can get into. So how do you get into college? No surprise, the first thing colleges will look at is the transcript. And yes, GPA is very important, but the colleges don't just reduce you down to a GPA. I always tell my students, your transcript really tells your academic story. What choices did you make? And they're going to look at your students within their own environment, within Westhill or Stanford High. What did you take advantage of? What courses did you take advantage of that are available? If a student is going in as an engineer, one would expect to see high-level math and science courses. If a student's going to be a classics major, one would expect to see Latin. So those types of choices. And also, did they take advantage of the rigor that was offered at the school? What do I mean by rigor? College preparatory courses, honors courses, AP courses. Did you take advantage of what was available? Now, as I said, we work with lots of different students. We've had students who have had 0 honors, 0 APs. Why? They weren't ready in high school to take that level, perfectly fine. We've had them go off to really great colleges. We've had students who have taken, I don't know how they do it, 8, 10 APs by the time they graduate high school. They go off to great colleges, but obviously they're not the same colleges. So when you put that list together, you want to make sure that the rigor level is similar to what your student is experiencing. So this is a very common question. Is it better to get an A in a lower level class or a B in an honors or AP class? And when you ask college admissions officers, those are the ones who evaluate the applications and admit students, the answer, I've been to so many colleges, invariably is, well, we'd really like to see the A in the AP course. So what do you do with that? We all know it's very hard to get an A in an AP course. What I tell my students is they need to do their best and challenge themselves, but not overface themselves. If you're going to get a C, D, or F in an AP or an honors course, you're not helping yourself. So really give some thought, challenge yourself, but think about, are you ready for it? Do you want to work that hard? Are you passionate about those subjects? After the transcript, schools will look at testing, standardized testing. So I'm talking about the ACT and the SAT. All schools in the United States will accept either. Most kids will test junior year unless there's a reason to test earlier. And what I tell my students, it is a lot of preparation. Nobody is born knowing how to take an ACT or an SAT. They will have to practice for them. But before they start practicing, before you enroll them in any kind of prep courses, see which test is better for your student. How do you do that? They take a practice ACT, timed, a practice SAT. Do they naturally score higher with no prep at all in one or the other? Or do they naturally like one more than the other? And then put all your prep time behind that test. I always feel badly when families come to us, well, we took the SAT 3 times, not going so well, now we're going to try the ACT. Make that decision up front and put all that time into the correct test. Some colleges, very, very few, the very most competitive colleges, the Ivies, Georgetown, will ask for an SAT-2. That's a subject test given by College Board, but most colleges do not require that. Also, different colleges will weigh the SAT and ACT differently. The big state schools, UConn, Michigan, Delaware, are very numbers oriented. This year with the pandemic was an anomaly because almost every school went test optional. The kids didn't have to send test scores, but in most regular years, the state schools are very numbers oriented and you really need those scores. Other schools, medium, smaller schools, privates, you're going to hear this word holistic. They're looking at the whole student and what does the SAT or ACT tell them in terms of context of the entire student. There are some schools that always are now test optional. There's a list, I think there's about 700 or 800 schools on the list now. You can get that at fairtest.org, the test optional school list. There's some great schools on that list. Bates and Bowdoin have been test optional for 15 years. George Washington University, American, U Chicago, all test optional. What I tell my students is it's best to learn how to take a standardized test, do your best, test a few times, and then you'll have more choices. And then once in a while in that outside possibility where you have a student who just can't conquer his or her nerves, then we'll go to the Fair Test org list and put together our list of colleges from there. So, transcript, grades and rigor, scores, open the door. They tell an admissions officer, is this student going to thrive here? Is he qualified to keep up with our work? But with selective colleges, there's so many students applying who have the grades, rigor, and scores. Then they start to look at everything else. And we'll talk about what the everything else is. And everything else is going to be shown in the application itself. So we did a little study. We did a little survey of admissions officers. And we asked them how often, I said the transcript tells the academic story, how often do students, applicants really cohesively tell their whole story in the application? And as you can see, 59% sometimes do it. So to put together a great application that shows everything a student does and there's a real cohesive story will help your students stand out. So, the stellar application, what is in the stellar application? First of all, you may or may not have heard of Common App, the Common Application. It's an online application that can go to many different schools at once. There are other applications that are sort of a variation of Common App, but we'll focus on Common App for tonight. And so you want your student to really tell the full story. We want to tell about their extracurricular activities. That's very important to colleges. What's an extracurricular? Anything the student does not in the classroom. So yes, it could be a sport. Yes, it could be clubs, but it could also be hobbies and gardening and cooking and reading and whatever else they do. And we want to tell the full story in the application, in the activity section. Students often don't really tell everything they've done or achieved. I always tell my students, if you won an award, how many were competing? There's a big difference if you won an award and there were 5 other competitors versus 25 versus 100. So those kinds of details, if you got a job, How did you get a job? Probably nobody knocked on your door and said, here's a job. You put together a resume, you looked at ads, you went knocking door to door. All of this shows great things about the student. It should all be reported in the activity section. Then there's the main essay, the personal essay. So what that tells, basically an admissions officer at this point knows if the student's qualified from the transcript and scores, what the student's bringing to campus from the extracurriculars, but what they don't, and they also, I should say, have teacher recommendations, and that tells the college what the student brings to the classroom. So admissions officers know a lot about the students. What they don't know is who is this student? Personal qualities. That is what the job of the main essay is. It's a story that shows the student's personal qualities. After reading that, the admissions officer should be able to connect with the student. Sometimes, some schools interview, but some don't. It's the only chance they have to meet the student, where the student becomes more than just a transcript and a list of activities. In the main essay, the student really becomes a person. Some schools will have their own essays on top of that main essay, that personal essay, supplemental essays, individual to each college. So there's a lot of work to be done. Those supplemental essays, the most common one is why. Why are you applying to our school? And that's where the student really has to research the school and show how he or she is a fit. So for example, we had a student applying to BU, Boston University, an engineering student. And the question was, why BU? And so he said, well, I wanted a big school. I wanted the city. I love the Red Sox. Well, isn't that why everybody's applying to BU? So you're not really standing out that way. We tell our students, tell the college something about yourself and then match it to the school. For example, I had the same engineering student. He wrote, since the time I was little, I was always building things. I built a model car, I built a model airplane, and when I toured the BU engineering labs and saw the kids building robots, I knew this was the type of hands-on program that I was looking for. So you want to use all of these parts of the application strategically to tell the full story. And now Tim's going to talk about the essay.
Hi there. Thanks, Beth. Yeah, I'm the essay specialist. I like to refer to the essay as the fun part of the college application process. I realize that, much is stressful or can be stressful about this whole college admission process, but the essay really shouldn't be anything that would cause you any kind of concern or worry. I often tell my students that if you're not having fun with your college admissions essay, you're not doing it right. Because you think about it, it just stands to reason that if you have fun writing your college admissions essay, then the colleges will have fun reading it. And your chances of getting admitted to that school, the school of your dreams, will improve. It's just, kind of just logical. That said, referring again to our study of college admissions officers, and we asked the question, which of the following sections is most likely to undermine an otherwise strong application? You can see that all the sections kind of got a mention, which kind of goes to Beth's point about how you need to really take a cohesive, holistic view of the college application process, because that's the way the colleges tend to look at it. But the main essay tends to rise above the others as maybe just a little bit more important, not necessarily a make or break, but something that definitely deserves your attention. So it should be fun, but it should be serious fun. You want to take time with it. It's not something you can just dash off the night before. Most of the students that I work with, we spend a good 8-10 hours putting that essay together and making sure that it's as strong as it can possibly be. So where do you start with that? And I'm having a little trouble with there we go. First of all, the most important thing to understand is the essay is about you. And when I say you, I mean you, the students in the audience, and definitely not the parents in the audience. Not that the parents can't be involved, but it's really important to appreciate that what the colleges are looking for are insights into the student, not into anybody else. So it's really essential, really key that the focus remain on the student, and the student, if not completely controls the process because some guidance is required, at least is taking the lead and really has the power to make sure that that essay says what they want to say the way that they want to say it. So where do you start with that? First and foremost, it's a good place to start is just to make a list of values, things that you value, or your personal values. Beth was talking about how the essay is an introduction to your personal qualities. So make a list of things that you think describe you, adjectives, things like loyalty, humility, persistence, whatever it is. It could be a very long list, it could be a very short list. It's not as though you're necessarily going to be writing your essay to that list of values, but it's kind of a good checkpoint as you're going through the process to see which values kind of rise to the surface. You'll be surprised to see that very often things that you hadn't thought of will sort of bubble up and become more prominent than maybe you even thought they would be. Take stock of your interests. You know, the first question is always, I have no idea what I'm going to write about. Well, write about what you're interested in, about what you love, about what you know. There has to be a why behind that choice. It can't just be that you're being self-indulgent and writing about whatever the heck it is that you want to write about. There needs to be a reason why you're writing it. Colleges are going to look at your essay and they'll say, well, that's a really nice story, but why is he or she telling me that? So where do you go for that? I would say most of the time, the essay comes from some aspect of an extracurricular activity, of something that happens outside the classroom. So whether it's sports or music or student government or something like that, it's not that you're necessarily writing about that thing per se, but maybe something that happened as part of your participation in that event. Usually can find something really interesting to write about there. But it doesn't have to be anything, you know, that's like earth-shattering or life-changing necessarily. I had a student in this cycle that just ended who wrote about reorganizing her kitchen, which doesn't sound like a very likely topic, but it actually really worked for her. It enabled her to showcase a lot of what makes her interesting and somebody that the colleges would like to have on campus. And then the third point I'd like to make about you is that you want to write about yourself today. That is from 9th grade on, about your high school career, maybe the summer before 9th grade, but definitely not elementary school. And I say that only because I've seen some essays come through that are about something that happened in 5th or 6th grade. That's not what the colleges are looking for. They want to meet you now. So it's really important to keep that focus. So in terms of putting the essay together, it's a story like any other story. It's got a beginning, a middle, an end, not necessarily in that order always. There's usually conflict of some sort. If you distill it down, a good story is usually, and this lines up very much with the way colleges look at this essay, with conflict and growth and change, or maybe not in that order. Maybe it's conflict, change, and growth. But the idea is they want to see how you got from point A to point Z, you know, and explain that process, that transition, how you grew and changed over the course of this particular story. So it's got an arc like a normal story does, a series of events that build, maybe a series of unfortunate events like Lemony Snicket, but it builds to a climatic point where it resolves, and then you have your denouement. It's only 650 words, so it's very short. Actually, more often than not, the problem is getting the essay down to 650 words, which is basically one page, single spaced. It's often harder to get it down to that point rather than worrying about, you know, how do I fill 650 words? You are the hero of your story, which is some of what often makes it a little bit uncomfortable at first, because chances are you've never had to write about yourself before. Chances are you probably never will again. So the essay is really a very different kind of writing. And when I say hero, I don't want to be intimidating about that. I'm defining hero not as somebody who saved someone out of a burning building, that kind of hero, although that would be a really good college essay probably if you had that happen. It's more the classical definition of a hero, which is really any person who leaves a safe space, who leaves home, goes out into the world, is challenged in some way, discovers something new, and comes back and shares it with other people. So by that definition, everybody is a hero. You're a hero. I'm a hero. Beth's a hero. Judy is definitely a hero. It's a hero who's on a journey of some sort, a path. And that could be a journey that's a very long journey over a long period of time, or a very short period of time, potentially. So for example, had a student who started his essay as a 5-year-old planting watermelon seeds in his backyard. And his essay took him through his whole progression up through high school of how that incident of planting a watermelon seed and watching it grow and prosper into a watermelon patch and free watermelon, as much watermelon as he could eat all summer, into a real passion for botany and environmental science. Sort of in the middle was a student who built a drone. It was a project that he thought would take maybe an afternoon. It ended up taking him 6 months. And so it was all about the trials and tribulations of that, the challenges that he faced, the resourcefulness that he showed, and also a little bit of a sense of humor. It could be a journey that happens like that in an instant. We had a young lady who was a dancer, and she was in class one day, and she was not really giving it her all. She was kind of watching the clock, and her instructor walked up to her, looked her in the eye, and said, "I'm disappointed in you." In that one moment, in that instant, she changed as a person. She grew. There was conflict, change, and growth all happening just like that. It wasn't just about her as a dancer. It was really how that moment changed her outlook on just about everything. How she really, are looking for insight into you. It's not that they're expecting you to be F. Scott Fitzgerald or Ernest Hemingway. I mean, you do want it to be well written, and the more colorful, the more of your creative writing skills you bring to bear, probably the better. But really, ultimately, all they're looking for is some insight into you. They want some window into what makes you you. So it's really not very complicated in that sense. And then your voice. And this really comes back to the point that I made at the beginning, is that this college essay is unlike other types of writing you've had to do. Certainly the sort of English essay type of writing that you may have had to do, which is very formal and maybe somewhat reserved. You let a little bit. I mean, it needs to be well written, obviously, but you want your voice to come clear and as sincerely and as authentically as you can muster. You know, all of us, I think, when we're writing, there's something that's going on in our heads that we want to say, but there's a filter between what's going on in our heads and what comes out the other end of your fingertips. Well, you want to remove that filter and really make the reader, in this case, the college admissions officer, feel as though you're sitting across the table telling them telling them your story. It really needs to be as pure and unadulterated as that. This aligns with what Beth was saying about strategy, that the essay, as I pointed out, is a very important part of the application process. It is in many ways a central part of the application process. It could be the glue that binds your application together. You've got all these disparate pieces, and the essay, when it works hardest, actually kind of helps pull those pieces together. It needs to make sense within the context of everything else in your application. It shouldn't stand out too much. It doesn't want to be too, obviously you don't want it to be very different from the rest of your application. You want it to be of a piece with your application. And what that means is that you need to have a very clear message. You can't really have a clear strategy unless you have a clear message. I had a college admissions officer say to me that the message of a good college essay, you should be able to fit it on the front of a t-shirt, not down the sleeves, around the back, but on the front. It should be that succinct. It comes back to, I would say, in most cases, to that set of values where we started. So what is your message? Well, maybe it's something about the value of persistence, or the value of humility, or the value of whatever it is that you want to say about yourself. Really that one thing. It could be maybe subsets of that one thing, but you really want one very clear message coming through. It needs to be memorable, which is really hard because these college admissions officers, have seen every topic possible, conceivable, and chances are you're going to start thinking about, well, was there something having to do with sports or music or student government or one of those usual kinds of things? And very quickly you might feel like, I'm not going to stand out if I just write about that. So how do you make it memorable? Well, often what I've found is maybe make a list of several different things that you might want to write about and see if they connect in any way. So for example, I had a student who wanted to write about skateboarding, but he needed that why. Why is he writing about skateboarding? Well, he tied it into his love of math. You know, so that really made a lot of sense for him. I had this one student who was an avid golfer. He was also a Grateful Dead fan. He thought he might write an essay about one or the other. So I said to him, well, do you see any connection between golf and the Grateful Dead? And surprisingly, he found one. He found that actually listening to the Grateful Dead improved his golf game. And that sort of is what gave his essay sort of that standout quality. Another student was a star field hockey player. So she was always out in the middle of the field when it was field hockey, but when it was lacrosse, she was on the bench. And it was a very different perspective. And she wrote her essay about the value of being on the bench. Well, it's exciting certainly to be in the middle of the game, but when you're on the bench, you can see the whole game and you can get a sense of the strategy and you can see things that you can't see when you're in the middle of things. So it sort of worked nicely that way. So be creative, try to, mash up, don't think it's one thing or the other. Sometimes it's both. It's just an interesting way to go about it and it often works well. So last and not least, and again, now I'm sort of, harping on this a little bit, that you want it to be entertaining, which means you definitely want to have fun, relax with it. Yeah, keep in mind your audience. College admissions officers are reading 60 or more of these essays each day when they're reading applications. And so you want to hold their attention. You want to use your best story writing skills. You don't want to give away what you're writing about in the first paragraph, or they might not read on. So create a little bit of mystery, tension, drama, intrigue, as much as you can muster, which will also help make your application, your essay memorable as well as entertaining. So one more look at this survey that we did. It was of about 50 college admissions counselors from across the country of schools of every size and every kind of level of rigor. And we asked them what are the most common errors made in the main essay. And you can see some of them are rather obvious, poorly written. You definitely don't want that. Again, in your voice, but well organized, grammatically correct and perfect in that sense. You want to make sure that it's proofed. You do not want a single typo in your essay. It could be the kiss of death. I mean, if there's anything that could undermine a great essay, it's a typo or worse, more than one typo, which, it just leaves not a great impression. Inconsistent with the rest of the application goes with what Beth is talking about, that holistic approach. Boring, unoriginal, want to be entertaining, obvious adult interference. I won't hammer that one again, but really, as a parent myself, I've been through this process twice, and going to college for parents is a process of letting go. It's not easy, but I would submit to you that the essay is a really great place to start that process. The most important thing that I'll leave you with is what the college admissions counselors said about message and focus, or the lack thereof. You can see that rises clearly above the rest as the most important thing that they're looking for in an essay. And so, what I would say about that is that it's really important going into your college essay writing process with somewhat of an idea of what it is that you want to say. Have it fixed in your mind what you think that message is going to be. At the same time, be open to the possibility that it could change, because writing your essay is not only about a journey, it's a journey in and of itself. And I think what really does make it fun is that you will learn something about yourself in the process of writing this essay, something that you didn't know before. I can't tell you how many times and how much it pleases me when I hear it. I never would have thought to write about that topic, but it really captured what I wanted to say. So with that, I will turn it back to Beth. Thanks very much.
Okay, so some other important factors on how to get into college after your extracurriculars and your essay. I don't know if any of you ever heard the expression demonstrated interest, but what that is when colleges offer admission, it's in the institution's best interest if students say yes. If a high percentage of the offers are the kids enroll, that helps them with their yield rate, it helps them in the rankings, that's their game. So some schools will track, they have no idea when a student applies, if they're at the top of the students list, the middle or the bottom, and especially with Common App, kids apply to a lot of colleges. So the colleges will guess and they'll track, did the student show and demonstrate interest in our school? So that's important to do with some of the schools that track that. So there are many different ways to demonstrate interest. One of the biggest ways is to visit the schools. Now that's not always possible, particularly now with the pandemic. But since the pandemic, schools have put online tours, drone tours, information sessions, panels with students. Take advantage of all that and sign up for them, and colleges may be tracking that you signed up. If you can eventually, when things tamp down with the pandemic, get onto campus, that's also a great way to demonstrate interest. Some schools do interviews, not all. That's another great way to demonstrate interest and really show the school that you know all about it, that you're a great fit. I always tell students, if you have the chance to interview, even the shy ones, with a little prep, they will be great interviewers. If you visit the school and you get a chance to sit in on classes, meet professors, those are things you can talk about in that supplemental essay. Admissions officers. So we talked about those are the ones, the gatekeepers who enroll students who admit you or not. They love to hear from students. They're people. They want to meet the high school students. So if you have a question, write to the admissions officer for that college for Connecticut. I have had a few kids once in a blue moon phone an admissions officer if they're brave enough. That's really great. Admissions officers love that. Another way to demonstrate interest is that supplemental essay we talked about, really doing your homework and showing fit. And then the biggest way to demonstrate interest is early decision. So what is early decision? First, let me talk about regular decision. So when you apply, regular decision, each school has its own deadline. Kids will apply senior year. But
what happened with her water?
Whoops, can you call it on you? The deadlines generally for early decision, for regular decision, or January of senior year, January 5th, January 15th, some are as late as February 1st. And that means everything's been submitted, your application and essays, your recommendation letters, your transcript, your SAT, ACT scores. And the college will take January, February, March, and no later than August 1st, you'll have all your replies back. You'll know where you got in, how many schools. And then you have the whole month of April to make a decision which school you go visit and decide which school you're going to enroll in. And then May 1st, all colleges in the United States, it's signing day, and you have to pick that one school that you're going to attend and sign the paperwork. So that's regular decision. Some schools have what's called early decision. That means, again, the deadlines are individual to the school, but they're moved up earlier. They're somewhere around November 1st, November 15th. That means everything's submitted, and you find out earlier. You find out usually by December 31st, often before Christmas. But the thing with early decision is that you can only pick one school for early decision, and you're making a binding commitment to that school. You will sign a document that says, if you admit me, I will come. I will withdraw all my other applications. So it's a very serious commitment. Now, why would you do that? Why would you apply early decision? Well, the first reason is you have a favorite school and you want to find out early. Seniors love to be done by December 31st, but there are strategic reasons. Most schools that have early decision will give the applicant a significant boost in the early round. What does that mean? It'll be a little easier to get in. And Often schools that have early decision will fill 40, 50, I've seen as much as 60% of the incoming class filled during that early decision round. It makes it very hard to get in the regular decision round. So there are strategic reasons. There's one other way to apply early action. Early action, just like early decision, not every school has early action, but they do. If they do, again, deadlines are moved up somewhere around November 1st. You find out early, somewhere around December 31st, or maybe even into January for the early actions, but no limit, unless it's a restricted early action, no limit on the number of schools you can apply early action to. And the nice part about early action is you find out early, but you're not making that commitment. So we had students who got into U Vermont, they found out the week before Christmas. They don't have to let U Vermont know if they're coming or whether they're gonna go to another school until May 1st with everything else. So to demonstrate interest, early decision is the biggest way. So I want to talk a little bit about extracurriculars because parents ask me all the time, what should my child be doing? Should they be doing sports? And when us parents, when I applied to college, they were looking for that well-rounded student. Now they're really assembling the well-rounded class. And so who are you in that class? You really want to, rather than the colleges say all the time, we don't want to see a laundry list of activities. They want to see activities students truly, authentically are passionate about, and they want to see that they take them to a high level of achievement. So you sort of become a specialist in whatever it is. The other thing that's important is being a little different. If you have an unusual interest, really spend a lot of time with it. That will make you stand out and not look like everybody else. So we all naturally gravitate to do what everybody else does, but it's the more unusual things that students are interested in that make them stand out. I had a young man a couple seasons back, and he had a blog on, he was Korean fashion. And he didn't even tell me about it until we were well into the process. And he said, oh, I didn't think the colleges would be interested in that. He built up a huge following, and very unusual, and the colleges loved it. So anything unusual, out of the box, absolutely. I also want to show you, this is called building a hook, how to take an interest and really achieve a lot. So this young man was a photographer. That was his hobby, not so unusual, but he did some great things with it. First of all, he was a photographer for his high school newspaper. Joining and being part of your high school community is going to show colleges that you would join and be part of the college community. He also joined photography clubs in and out of school. And then the next thing was took lots of initiative. He organized his own shows of his photography all around town at different local banks and stores. So that's a great way. He had his own photography exhibits. There are lots of contests for the arts for high school students, so I encouraged him to enter, and he eventually had some awards in photography. And then one summer, he interned with a prominent photographer. He also got his own paid photography jobs, and he continued to study photography throughout high school by taking classes. So that's an example of a hook that really you build to a high level of achievement. During our survey, we also asked the admissions officers, what do you value most in extracurricular activities? So you can see long-term commitment, so not that laundry list, but things you really love and spend a lot of time doing that. Consistency, creativity, leadership. That's a word I don't love for teenagers because I'm a mom of kids in their 20s. They were not leaders when they were teenagers. They became leaders when they were older, but the colleges all talk about leadership. So how do you become a leader? Not everybody can be captain of the sports team or president of a club, but I always tell kids, take initiative, and that's a way to become a leader. Think of your own projects, the young man with his blog, all those followers on his blog is leadership. I call it the 2 I's in terms of really high level extracurricular activities. Initiative and impact. What kind of initiative did you take and what impact did it have? And I tell my students, no matter what they're doing, always think of how can I improve it? If you have a job, don't just do the minimum, make suggestions. And if they have an impact, then we can write about that in your application. And we write about everything you accomplished doing that. And so it's a great habit for kids to get into across the board. So we threw a ton of information at everybody tonight, probably more than 10 things that you need to know to get into college. If you remember 3 things from tonight. Number 1, remember we started with that just right list. It's individual to each school, to each student, but you want to really start with that and get the list right. That's the key to success. 2, stand out by being unique and accomplishing your passions to a very high level. And 3, you're going to show and showcase that uniqueness in your application, your essays, and interviews. So thank you for coming, everybody. We're going to take a look at questions. This is our contact information. We're located in Westport, but actually we've been working completely on Zoom. We work with lots of Stanford students. And anybody who was here tonight, if you want to drop us a line, we'll do a complimentary consultation for you. So Tim, why don't you tell us how to get the questions?
Let's see.